Okay, here's the truth some of you are gonna find tough to swallow. Your business probably shouldn't exist. In fact, to be honest, most businesses shouldn't really exist. And the reason for this is simple. You are selfish. Yep, it's you, the founder. You are the problem.
Are you talking to me?
Your motivations, your mindset are almost guaranteeing failure because they are inadvertently creating a business that the world does not need. And the worst part is that you probably don't even know it. Now look, I've been a strategy advisor for over a decade now, and in that time I've analyzed hundreds of companies and I've spoken to hundreds of founders too. And after a while you start to spot patterns like this. And what I'm talking about here is the fundamental pattern that prevents most businesses from ever breaking through to the true scale and success that their founders are dreaming of. It all comes down to the way the founder thinks about their business. Because everything else, every decision, every strategy, every tactic is downstream of the software in their brain. So in this video, I'm going to lay it all out. I'm going to take you through the 3 stages of founder consciousness that I've observed that all great entrepreneurs must pass through on their journey. The first one, well, it guarantees failure. The second guarantees mediocrity, and that's where most people get stuck. But the third, well, the third is where iconic brands are formed, and most people don't even know about it. So let's get into it. We start with the first stage of founder consciousness, and it is absolute poison. But, to be fair, it is where we all begin, myself included. Even the greats had to start here because it is almost always the motivation for starting a business in the first place. Just serving yourself, a completely self-centered, grabby mindset. Now, look, just think about your motivations for starting your own business, or if you haven't actually done it yet, think about the reasons that you think you might like to start a business someday. Now, generally, they're going to be things like this. I'd like to be my own boss, or I'd like to have more time freedom, or hell, I'd like to keep the rewards of all my hard labor. Or maybe it even is just something like, I want to be rich. Now, these are all perfectly normal and perfectly reasonable motivations. I mean, who wouldn't want those things? Who wouldn't want to have more freedom and agency in their life? But there is one issue with all of this. The market doesn't care. I mean, the market, it doesn't give a damn about your motivations, your dreams, your comfort, your life. The market, customers, they care about what you can do for them, not what they can do for you. They're just as selfish as you are. And therefore, businesses that are built for the founder's benefit, they fall short of that. And so, unsurprisingly, well, they tend not to do very well. Now, these are the businesses that shouldn't really exist, and they're everywhere because they don't offer anything to the world. They do not give. They are simply there to take. Now, typically, this stage of consciousness creates businesses with 3 telltale and terrible characteristics. First, a completely generic offer. Often the business is just, a copycat of whatever the founder was doing when they were an employee before, and they just want to then take all the money for themselves. Second, founder-centric, idealistic messaging. These are like basically vanity projects, and you can tell they lean hard into the founder's personal preferences without considering whether the market actually feels the same way or cares about the things that they do. And then number 3, resistance to feedback. They have their idea and damn it, they're sticking to it, even when the signals from the market are screaming at them to change course. Now, like everyone, I started this way. The first iteration of my business was built around this idealistic concept I had about embedded creativity, which was kind of about doing cool, sexy advertising style ideas, but within the fabric of the business itself. Now look, it was an interesting idea, but nobody bought it, so I had to move on from it pretty quickly if I wanted to survive. Now luckily, most founders do. They do move on. Most aren't stupid enough to stay in this first stage of consciousness for very long. I mean, most people don't like getting slapped in the face by reality, quite frankly. And so they quickly realize, if I want people to pay me money, I better think a bit about what they want for a change. Very smart. And that takes us on to the second stage of founder consciousness. Not serving yourself, but serving the customer. Ah yes, serving the customer. Now, this is an interesting one because on the face of it, it seems like the optimal mindset to take into business. You'll hear many people tell you that this is what great businesses are all about and that this is the secret. And to be sure, it is a hell of a lot better than just serving yourself. But it's got its problems. You see, when founders shift their mindset towards serving the customer, they tend to start taking customer needs very seriously. Of course, they talk to them, they listen, they learn what they want, and naturally they try to give it to them. And that, of course, that's all great. And they start making some sales. But the problem is that this approach is generic best practice. There's no leverage here. There's no edge. There's no creativity. Serving the customer isn't clever, right? It's just what a basic business is supposed to do. This is business 101. And so, of course, it yields basic business results in turn. Now, typically what you'll see here are these things. First, the business starts to lean into what works in its category. It starts copying the tried and tested formulas of other businesses because, what do you know? That's the stuff that the customer wants, right? But in doing so, it drifts into a commodified space. Second, such businesses, they do tend to start insidiously cutting prices. What do customers want? They want cheaper products. And hey, we're here to make them happy, so why not? So we start down that slippery slope. And then number 3, you just start working really damn hard. You're always trying to do a good job and be better than your competitors. And ultimately, that's just an exhausting race to the bottom. Now, in my case, I went through this phase as well when I evolved from my weird egocentric idea to a more generic strategy offering. I just tried to do the things that worked and to please my clients. And you know what? It did work, but it just worked in a kind of mediocre, uninspiring way. It was a living, but that was kind of it. Now, this mediocrity is where most businesses end up because their founders think, well, this is it. This is the destination. This is how I'm meant to be. Because they don't realize that there is another higher stage of founder consciousness still yet to explore. One that few ever think about, let alone, frankly, embody. And that is stage 3, serving the industry. Yes, the industry. Here your focus is not on serving the customer. That is actually kind of incidental. Instead, it's on serving the wider industry, the wider category that you are a part of, moving it forwards, fixing structural errors, and growing the pie, not stealing from your competitors. Here, you are raising your gaze up, and you're not focusing on the concerns of individual customers and making them happy so much, although of course that remains important on a day-to-day level. But instead, you're looking up to survey the entire industry terrain, and you ask, what is happening out there? What are the dynamics? What are the flaws in this industry? Where are the gaps? How can we innovate on what is already there? Now look, if you look at every great brand in history, you're going to see that their strategies are fundamentally focused on serving and advancing their industry around them by changing the standard model. I mean, like basic examples like Starbucks, they completely changed the way that coffee shops are operated. Apple changed the way computers are designed. Uniqlo changed the way that the fashion industry works. You can't get to these sorts of ideas simply by serving the customer. That's only going to keep you locked into the status quo. Because ultimately what you need is a helicopter view of the entire terrain to see what the patterns are and where the opportunities lie. Remember, great business ideas are relative. They are relative to the status quo. They are relative to your competitors. Apple, for example, they only seemed creative because the computer industry was kind of dull and grey. And Uniqlo's focus on timeless basics was only fresh because the rest of the industry was so driven by trends. See, this is what it means to serve the industry. Now, for myself, I too had to raise my gaze and not just think about how can I do good strategy for my clients, but instead I had to think about what is wrong with the strategy industry in general. What are its pathologies? What does it lack? And what I noticed fundamentally was that it was too technical and academic, and that there was no accessible, intuitive entry point, which then led to my book, No Bullshit Strategy, and my content and my product offers and this video that you're watching today. For example, if you go and check out my program, the Strategy Shortcut System, link in the description, you will see a product which is a direct response to the existing dynamics of this industry. Now look, I'm no Steve Jobs, but I am trying at least to embody his higher form of entrepreneurial consciousness. And if you ever want to make something that's powerful, something that matters, then you need to do it too. Remember, every decision you make is silently driven by your underlying assumptions, your underlying view of the world. And so, if you want to make better decisions, you need to update these assumptions. You need to update that software in your head. And then when you've done that with this video, then you can start to think strategically. Like, for example, by asking some of the rare questions in this other video right here, which are guaranteed to uncover unique forms of competitive advantage. Check it out.